Welcome to the live release of David Chafe's new album, Still. My name is Ian Foster. I am a musician here in St. John's and also the technical producer of this record, and it's an honor to be here to be the MC for this afternoon's proceedings with David, who is sitting right next to me. Hi,
Here
David.
I am. Hi, Ian. How are you?
Thanks for having us here.
My pleasure.
Yeah, so we're just going to take a couple of minutes before you perform this record in its entirety to talk a little bit about your music and your history with music. Let's start there. Let's start with a brief history of David Chafe.
This is just a 1-hour show, but my history is not untypical of most musicians, yourself and other musicians in the audience. I started as a young lad taking lessons at 8, but I was inspired really by my paternal grandfather, who could not have afforded piano lessons or music lessons back in the day. And when my father bought our first used piano, it was Pop Chafe, who I heard playing the piano by ear. And I just remember as a 5-year-old, I think I was at the time, just being attracted to that sound and those colors, and I think musicians understand, the phraseology of color, the color of sound. Mm-hmm. And so fast forward through my lifetime, I kept studying piano until I was about 19. And also not typical of a lot of musicians, I quit at about 19 and saw what I thought was the light and pursued the then dream of becoming an accountant. And then I saw another light and quit accounting and came back to music after about a decade and a half. And so here I am 21 years later in the music business, and we'll see how this goes today. I might go back to accounting after today, who knows.
Was classical music always the genre of choice?
Yes, it always was, and I can't explain why, other than, I guess, the piano teachers I had growing up. I was taught classically as a young child. I was taught classically then as a teenager when we moved out of Mount Pearl, where I grew up, into the big city. And then as a student of the Munn School of Music, it is and was then classically centered. So it was just it just became part of my DNA.
Right. So you had, instead of hit parader posters, you had like Bach up on your walls as a teenager.
That's correct.
Yeah, perfect. Okay, excellent. Tell us about this record a little bit. So it's called Still.
Yeah.
I recommended David Chafe's Half Hour of Classical Power. You refused that title.
I did.
And you called it Still instead. Tell us about why Still.
Well, interesting that we started talking about my musical path, because Still, I don't know yet if it's by accident or by design, but is quite autobiographical. It contains a series of pieces that represent various stages of my life. Some of the pieces I performed as a young teen in the Kiwanis Music Festival, and which I competed in quite a bit as a younger guy. And then there are other pieces that I learned as a music student much later on. And there's even one piece I learned just about a month before I recorded the album. So as far as the title goes, I have to give credit first and foremost to the graphic designer of the album, Kyle McDavid, who came up with the title. But I was inspired. He and I, through our conversation, I sent him a photo that I took of Kill Devil Mountain in August, and it was one of those. We all have these experiences, I think, but it was one of those moments where the tide was out on the bay, and I was just looking across on this perfect August day, and there was not a ripple on the water, and I couldn't even hear leaves rustling. And I just I was out there with a children's choir, and I just had a rare moment of peace and quiet, and I just stood there, I think, for probably an hour, and I just took one of those kind of, I don't know if it was a midlife crisis or what it was, but I just took a moment and just kind of reflected on my life and my career at that time. And I have to say, it might sound a little corny, but that was the moment when I was really moved to record this album. And the album consists, as you will hear, of pieces that I hope evoke stillness and calm in what otherwise is a fairly manic and fast-paced world. So all around, I just felt like the timing of this music and of this album in my life was important.
Right. I'm obviously very familiar with the record myself.
Yeah, tell me, I'll turn the table on you. What was, because you've recorded lots and lots of genres. What was it like recording a classical piano album? What's it like working with me, Ian?
Well, I obviously can't say that on mic, but No, it was an excellent experience. You know, I'm used to the folk, pop, blues, these genres, and those genres are typically multi-track overdubbing genres, I suppose, for lack of a more detailed description. In this case, it was about capturing a very specific moment with a single instrument and trying to capture all the character of that instrument, which is a big challenge. The grand piano is one of the most difficult instruments to do. So I really enjoyed working on it and trying to capture that from a technical perspective. And I will say as well, to your point about the sound of the record, that I think that what separates any record is the X factor of vibe and character. And I do think that this record has a feeling to it, and I would call that stillness as well. Like, I think that you know, works so well as a title. So congratulations to you
very much
today. Yeah. So tell us a little bit about what you're playing today.
Well, I'm going to make sure that I have the order correct. Here's the album, everybody. Everybody on radio, here's the album. I'm going to play, somewhat selfishly, all of my favorite pieces that I've learned over the years. You'll hear, because not everybody on video or on radio will have the program with them. I'll just recite it here very, very quickly. I'll start with a Mendelssohn Song Without Words and a beautiful Chopin Mazurka. And one of the more challenging pieces on the album, and that I've learned over my lifetime, is the third piece, a Fauré Nocturne. And I discovered in recording this album, when I wanted to learn and record something new, this exquisite little obscure piece by a composer named Moritz Moszkowski, just a short little romance. I haven't even heard a recording of it other than ironically, some guy in his living room in the States who recorded himself playing it. But it's an absolutely gorgeous piece, one of those obscure pieces that I think is appropriate for this setting. It's a true parlor piece, I believe. Back to Mendelssohn and Chopin with another Song Without Words and Chopin's Nocturne in E minor. A slight departure from the romantic theme, going back a couple of hundred years prior to François Couperin, with a piece out of the Baroque era, but in a style that I think suits the lyricism of this album. And then a few short works by Schumann and Brahms, and then a much beefier piece, shall we say, by Rachmaninoff. And then the piece, the album and this afternoon's performance ends with a piece that I have not performed since I was 16 years old. And I've barely played it other than recording it since I was 16 years old. And I saved it for last because if there was a turning point in my life, it was that piece in that particular moment. I was at a youth music camp in PEI as a kid and wasn't taking music seriously. It wasn't on my radar as a teenager to study this, to work towards this crazy career that you and I have landed in. And in the Grieg, the very last piece, the Grieg Nocturne in C major, there are several moments composed into the piece of silence. Don't worry, VOWR, it's not very long moments of silence, but there are a few seconds of complete silence. And I remember back then, I'm really nervous today, but when I was 16, I wasn't nervous at all. And at the end of the camp, all of the students had to perform a piece that we learned that week, and this was the piece that I learned in a week. And I remember in front of a packed auditorium, I don't know, a couple hundred people or so, mostly students and their parents. When I hit those moments of silence towards the end, I remember thinking to myself, did everybody leave? Like, you could hear a pin drop in the room. And then there was another moment of silence, and again, just absolute dead silence. And when it was over, and this is not a cue to my in-house audience here, by the way, but when it was over, I just kind of, brushed my brow and took my seat and was prodded along by all my friends seated around me to go back to the stage. I had nothing else to play, and I didn't know what was going on. But what was going on was the applause was continuing, and it was just one of those, it was the first ovation I ever received, and it catapulted me on, I would say, the path that I'm on today. So, yeah.
Nice, nice. Well, let's hear the record. So without further ado, David Chafe.
Thank you. Thank you all so much. I'm going to try and talk now. Some thank yous to take care of before I forget. I have to look this way because I'm going to forget if I go only by memory. First to Joan and to Mom and Dad, who are in, for better or for worse, in every audience that I've ever done, and keep encouraging me, I think, to do music or get a real job. I'm not sure which, but I'm glad they're in every audience that I'm in. There are kind of dual production teams for an event like this, the album release, the album itself and the release event. So I'm just going to kind of mash up everybody here for a moment. Sorry, Ian, I've got my back turned to you, but you're the most critical piece. I'm saving the best for you. I do want to all of you to please acknowledge, not that any one person is more important, but there are certain people who just go above and beyond and who are just incredibly professional and accessible, and that's my friend Ian Foster. Yes, by all means, put your hands together. Ian has, if you're a podcast follower, Ian has a podcast called If and When, IF, Ian Foster, get it? And so this show today not only is live on YouTube and on VOWR, but is, I think, going to air on an early 2020 If and When broadcast as well. So thank you, Ian, for doing that. And I want to acknowledge as well Ian's partner in life and on stage. Don't you shake your head at me. Nancy Hines. If you have not yet discovered Ian Foster's music, and in particular Ian, not to take anything away from Ian's solo repertoire, but Ian and Nancy together, they are just one of the most exquisite duos, musical duos I've ever seen. And they are, in just a couple of days' time, talk about a busy guy, they are just about to embark on a 3-week tour of Ontario, New Brunswick, and Newfoundland. And their St. John's concert, for my in-house audience and for anybody listening and watching who are in St. John's, is at St. Mark's Anglican Church on Logie Bay Road. It's for a great cause on December the 12th at 7:30. Do go check them out and buy their music at ianfoster.ca. They are spectacular. So thank you both. Chad Stride is tucked away back here, being uncharacteristically inconspicuous. But Chad was the artistic. I was lucky enough. Usually on an album there are 2 producers, and I like to boast that or 1 producer. I'm sorry. I like to boast that I have 2 producers. Ian served me both artistically and technically, of course. And Chad, boy, I'll tell you, if there was anything to fix in my music, he would be the one to tell me, and he did. But so I am very, very grateful for Chad's honesty and for his experience and for his friendship as well, for helping put this album together. Mark Chafe is tucked away behind the camera. He is responsible for bringing this to YouTube. So thank you, Mark, for all of your work. And he was also production assistant on the album, and happens to be my first cousin. Richard Bradley is in Ontario. He is the mixer and master. Any musicians out there, do get in touch with this guy. As Ian said, the guy is an absolute magician, and he can make, if he can make me look better, he can make anybody look better. He's just sound better. He's absolutely magnificent. Takes out all those little ambient noises that aren't planned, like ambulances going up Hambleton Avenue and so on. Kyle McDavid, I mentioned earlier, is responsible for devising the title of Still. He worked very closely with me and is responsible for the gorgeous album artwork, which is, by the way, of Kill Devil Mountain, that photo I talked about, looking through kind of a mosaic of tiles. So that's Kyle's design. Thank you, Kyle. To Reverend William Mercer of Wesley United Church, who very generously donated the chapel of Wesley United Church for recording in late September. Very grateful to Bill, and also for all of the card table chairs that my in-house audience is sitting on. Tucked away behind the mixer board back there is Craig Benson. Craig is actually employed with Stingray, that is VOCM, and K-Rock, hence the K-Rock truck outside, but he volunteers hours and hours and hours and hours of time for VOWR, and Craig is bringing this to our VOWR audience today, so thank you, Craig. And speaking of VOWR, I want to acknowledge Glenn Tilley. Yes, that Glenn Tilley of Here and Now in years gone by, those of us who are old enough to remember. He volunteers with VOWR as well and recorded a gorgeous ad that's been playing for a while, so thank you, Glenn. Doreen Whalen is here. She is the station manager of 95-year-old VOWR, and the first woman to manage the station. So thank you, Doreen. Before I sign off from VOWR, I want to let our listeners and viewers know as well that Still, the album, which I'm going to shamelessly hold up, is now available for download at most major download and streaming sites, and hard copies are available by contacting me at dbchafe@gmail.com, or I just found today that they will be available at Fred's Records. Thank you, Jim Brokenshire, as of today, I think. So thank you for that, Fred's. And as for other work that I do besides, I just want to mention this by way of naming a couple of other friends as well. If you see me on stage, chances are I'll be either in a church setting or doing a solo concert like this, but I also play piano for two very prominent choirs in the city, Cantus Vocum Chamber Choir and Atlantic Boy Choir. So if you happen to spot those on the concert calendars, do go out and support those groups as well. They're extraordinary musicians and work very, very hard. To the VOWR audience, I want to thank everybody for listening in to Jack Head. Thank you for letting me interrupt Sunday Variety. And at this point now, actually, I'm going to turn it back to VOWR and return to our listeners to Sunday Variety with Jack Head.